Hello, everyone. This is Philosophy for the People, and due to not cultivating the proper virtues, Ben has failed to write an essay this week. So instead, we're going to do one of my favorite activities and run down the Phil Survey's paper, and I'm going to make Ben answer the questions on it. Unfortunately, the survey is literally 100 questions long, so there's 0% chance we get through all of it. So I've carefully created the best questions. Though I'm going to begin with us very quickly going through ones that we've covered already in previous episodes, which is the trolley problem, where we switch.
Yeah, switch might be okay. Push definitely isn't.
Yeah, I was going to say the next one is the fat man on the bridge. Free will.
Yes.
Compatibilism. Yes.
Yeah, compatibilism. Yes.
God.
Spooky free will. No. What's that?
God.
No.
Strongest argument for theism. We disagree, but we've talked about this before. Where you think I think cosmological, and you think fine tuning.
Right.
True contradictions.
No.
How many boxes?
I don't know that.
But we've already covered it on the previous episode, in fact. Possible worlds. Concrete. Something else.
Concrete possible worlds, I really doubt
it. Someone's asking in the chat. I hope Ben fails, but it's not that kind of quiz. I mean, one of the questions on the quiz is if there is philosophical knowledge. So it's disputed whether you could even win or lose.
Yeah, that kind of says everything.
Are there
anything on this quiz? Yes or no?
And then there's some questions we haven't covered, but I think the answers are very obvious, which is the mind physical or not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like a more fine-grained position on this. I actually find all the options pretty unsatisfying, and I think there really are problems with some of the sort of filled out materialist theories that have been thus far, suggested. And then some of the thought experiments about consciousness and stuff really do give me pause. So I don't, there's no like particular materialist theory of mind that I sort of feel wholeheartedly good about subscribing to. But it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like what, but like, sure, materialism in general, yeah. I mean, like some versions of it got to be true.
I mean, there is a question later.
Magic.
There is a question later about like functionalism or not, whatever. Yeah. The next one, which I hope is obvious, is socialism or capitalism.
Socialism.
And the last one I hope is obvious is abortion, permissible or impermissible?
It's permissible.
Which is also the strongest consensus on the Phil paper survey, apart from questions on whether like external reality exists and human consciousness exists.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is just one of those things where if you're, I mean, look, whereas I do think it's the right, I do think that's clearly the right answer in terms of like looking at the philosophy.
Oh no, like I think the answer, why the answer is yes, is quite complicated and not obvious. But I think the answer is obvious. Like it's definitely which one's the right one.
Like I do definitely think that there are much better. I do find the arguments in favor of abortion rights very convincing, but I also think that the fact that it's so overwhelming is less a testament to that than it is just a sort of sociological fact.
Right, that it was filled out by highly educated English speakers.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, yeah, you fall into a slice of the population that's like going to have cultural attitudes such that you're almost certainly going to be pro-choice.
But the first question on the actual list, I think, is a very, very interesting one, which is aim of philosophy. Which is the most important? And you have a list of truth/knowledge, understanding, wisdom, happiness, or goodness/justice.
Yeah, truth/knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the question is kind of between that and like understanding. While I don't have much for wisdom, happiness, or goodness, justice. So obviously, in the ancient world, these things were more seriously taken.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, if you're doing normative philosophy, you're arguing about what's good. So, there's a sense in which what you're interested in is goodness/justice. But like really, with I don't. I mean, I think that like seeing that as the sort of more primary aim is kind of wrong in a basic way. Like you could like a utilitarian and like you've run your utility calculations and decided that actually there'd be like more happiness overall if everybody was a Kantian, right? But it's like
Right.
so that would be an interesting moral dilemma for you. But like what I'm interested in for the philosophy part is like what's actually true.
Yeah. I should actually. I decided. I think I will mark you. I will give you marks. And the right answer will just be the most popular answer. So did you say truth there, or did you say understanding?
I said truth/knowledge.
Okay, X. Understanding one, not truth/knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
But truth/knowledge was second.
It's
And
also
happiness
yeah,
and goodness were way down.
yeah, but it's also like an interesting like I don't know. I want to ask these people some follow up questions about what exactly they mean by understand.
Right. I mean, that's the great thing about the field paper survey. There's lots of questions where like 40% of people refuse to answer any of the options because philosophers are just like that. The next one is a priori knowledge. Yes or no?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
You can have a little bit of a priori knowledge, like as a treat.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I didn't believe in it as I was younger, but only because I misunderstood what it was actually saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a sort of way of being Aquinian about this and saying, well, to the extent that we can have it, it's not really a priori. It's just that all of our beliefs are tangled up in all of our other beliefs, and they're judged by the empirical evidence at the same time. Uh, Anybody who's not familiar with this view, just Google like Quine web of belief, and I think you can make like a halfway plausible argument for that. I'm not totally sure at the end of the day what I think about it, but like, also I think brass tacks, what people really mean when they say a priori knowledge. It's like, yeah, you can have some a priori knowledge. I mean, that there are plenty of things that like we can be pretty confident that are true.
Right,
Where
because the basic objection that I see to it on Reddit or whatever is like, I learned math by someone telling me about it, and so isn't it empirical? But the point of a priori knowledge
yeah,
is
that's just
that
not
it,
a
it
question.
doesn't matter how you actually knew it, but that if you know what two is and you know what, well, the other two is, you know what a plus sign is, you can understand that the correct answer is four without any reference to anything in the outside
Yeah,
world.
so I think the point that Reddit is missing in this case is what philosophers of science call the distinction between the context of discovery and the context of justification.
Yeah.
That like how it is that you happen to come to believe something isn't really the issue. The issue is like how it is that you're justified in believing it.
Right, the justification for things is not generally because I got taught them in high school.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, well, and I mean, look, I mean, if it's, like let's say you went to like a parochial school and like you learn math from the same nun, who told you that Jesus was born of a virgin, and so it's like a
They, they,
clearly
they they taught me condoms don't work in school.
yeah, exactly right. Like nuns say all kinds of things. Like that's in only some cases is are you justified in continuing to believe what she told you?
Well, you got that one right, Ben,
Oh, good.
because 72% of philosophers say that there is a priori knowledge and only
This
18%
is
disagree.
definitely how we should be using the word right.
Yes.
Great. Yes.
So
Go.
you're one out of two. Um, and then the next one is we've mentioned it, consciousness.
Yeah.
And then it has these various theories you can sign up to.
Oh,
Dualism, eliminativism, functionalism, identity theory, or panpsychism.
I mean, I think that I'm very unsympathetic to dualism. I don't know. I mean, I think eliminativism is obviously false. Like, pain exists, thoughts exist, etc.
I'll be asking you later if any human adult has consciousness, because this was asked on the survey.
Okay, well, I don't want to spoil my answer now, but it's like, yeah, look, consciousness clearly exists, so eliminativism is wrong. Like, eliminativism says that we should think about consciousness not like we think about like water, where it's like, okay, we didn't used to know that water was H2O. We've always known there's water. But like the way we think about like witchcraft, we just realized that the entire discourse is an error. And like
Right.
all there really are, there's like neurons and stuff, but there's no consciousness. This is like the Paul and Patricia Churchland position. And I think that's pretty as obviously false as anything could be here. Like I actually think that's more obviously false than dualism is. And
it is the least popular option, so.
And I'm very unsympathetic to dualism. But because again, like I said, I don't really know. I don't really have a theory of consciousness, but I'm pretty sure it's not magic. So I guess that's my answer.
Cool. Eating animals and animal products, is it permissible, etc.? Omnivorism, vegetarianism, or veganism?
Yeah, so the phrasing here is a little bit tricky because
it's like it says like in normal circumstances, in ordinary circumstances.
Sure. Well, what I was thinking is that the question is about what you think is morally permissible, but
Yeah,
then
it's not what you actually do.
The answers sound like options for what you actually do. Yeah, look, I think that I don't. This is an answer that's going to bear very little resemblance to what I actually do, but and I'm always kind of usually reluctant. I actually did mention it once in an article, but I'm usually reluctant to answer the what I actually do questions or even the what should you do questions, because like I think
but right now you're just hanging out with your friend Stefan with a small audience of 47 people.
Yeah. I mean, just because I don't like it when leftists get caught up in lifestyle stuff. But look,
right.
Since we're just having a nice afternoon of chatting about philosophy, yeah, I think that it's I think that it is certain. I think it's like awfully morally dubious to think that it's okay to kill sentient creatures that can have good lives and would prefer to be alive and all that stuff for the sake of of your liking real burgers better than Impossible Burgers. That's I think that's like a super duper morally questionable proposition. And that's even on the sort of like my friend Mark, who's a defender of this. I'm a lot more skeptical of it. Like says like, okay, factory farming is wrong, but it's okay if the animal just has one bad day. And
like every beef burger is going to cost $100 or something if you do that.
Exactly, right. So that's like and so like whatever, even if it were like kind of okay in the abstract, on the one bad day theory, like mass meat consumption for billions of people, right, is only really going to work with factory farming, and factory farming seems like very wrong. So look, I have a dog who I'm like obsessed with, and like I don't really know that there's that much difference in principle between dogs and pigs. So yeah,
I think the dogs are much stupider.
Well, I haven't spent enough time with pigs to be able to answer that definitively, but but yeah, I mean, look, I think in theory, like animal products are fine given humane treatment. I don't know how plausible it is that you could. I mean, the same issue might come up. We were just talking about for meat there, but I guess again, keeping in mind that I'm bad and acratic, and this has nothing to do with me. I'm just saying, answering the abstract philosophical question, I guess vegetarianism.
Right. Well, wrong, according to most people that look at the survey. It depends how you add it up, actually, because if you add veganism and vegetarianism together, it's basically 50-50.
Okay.
I do believe that killing animals is permissible. I don't know if that makes omnivorism
Yeah.
generally fine. I think it probably makes. I think you probably shouldn't still have animal agriculture. Human agriculture. Someone in the chat was suggesting that.
Yeah, human agriculture.
But the only way to kind of rescue this idea is for me
That
to
one
have
I would have a lot more less caveats about. I just say no.
The only real way to say it's permissible to kill animals is for me to have very questionable views about newborns and disabled. So, values in science. Is ideal scientific reasoning necessarily sensitive or insensitive to non-epistemic values? As in, is science necessarily value-laden, value-free, or can be either?
Yeah. So on the first question, I would say ideal
That's
scientific.
one question, by the way. It's a bit awkward, but yeah.
Yeah, because those really sound like two questions to me, but maybe I'm just interpreting the second part too literally. Because it says the science value laden. It's like, well, if you mean epistemic values, like values about,
Yeah, it's is best scientific reasoning, ideal scientific reasoning, value laden or non-value laden with
where,
non-epistemic values.
yeah, non-value laden.
Really?
Yeah, I think that I don't, I think that like, I mean, I think there's like a little bit of wiggle room here because it depends on what you're like. I think that we need to separate out a little bit the questions of how we need to separate out a little bit, like whether we're talking about like whether we're sort of including the category, the questions of like what to look into in the first place, right? Because those are obviously
Right.
going
I mean,
to.
that's what I'm thinking about. That science is necessarily value laden because it should and does value like technologies which benefit humans more than ones which harm them or just do like random bullshit for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, sure. I think that's like a pretty minimal sense. But like the actual sort of theory selection, the sort of like again, once you decide, like, I mean, look, I think that it's like, yes, inevitably, I mean, the word ideal is a little bit tricky here because anytime you're like idealizing something, you're sort of mentally abstracted away from some of the things that are really true, right? So I guess I'm not
Right.
sure how many of those things we're abstracted away from here. But yeah, sure. In just about any imaginable circumstance, time is limited, resources are limited. Some questions are just fucking boring, right? There's no like real
Yeah.
reason to investigate with them. So it's like, yes, I think non-epistemic values are inevitably and quite properly going to shape which questions we investigate in the first place. But then I think once the actual investigation is happening, then the science is better the more it's not laden with non-epistemic values.
Interesting. I'm gonna put that down as can be either.
Can be either. Okay.
But the most popular option was necessarily value laden.
I don't know what to say about that. Everybody's wrong.
Well, in this case, you're wrong because we're doing unpopularity. Well-being, and I found the answer to this question very surprising. Well-being, hedonism, experientialist, desire satisfaction, or objective list. Like,
Uh,
what is the proper account of well-being?
yeah, not hedonism. Like I do find like the Nozick stuff, the experience machine, pretty convincing there. But I don't know that I actually have a I don't know that I actually have like a very firm view about like what the right answer is here.
It's yeah. I mean, I would probably say hedonism isn't quite true and desire satisfaction isn't quite true, because obviously you think of like a guy who really fucking loves doing fentanyl all day. And like he's not even in danger or anything. He's like really good at doing fentanyl, but he doesn't do anything else. And like it doesn't seem like he has well-being. It seems like he has the opposite of well-being.
It does. So I guess that does militate towards some sort of objective list view, but then like kind of trying to figure out like, you know, what we even think constitutes being on the list, right? You know, is really tricky. So I think I'm
right.
a little bit agnostic about the right answer here, but I am pretty convinced that hedonism can't be all, you know, the complete correct answer.
But yeah, objective list really crushingly won that one.
Okay.
And now for 4 very spicy questions.
Right.
Gender, is it biological, psychological, social, or unreal?
All of the above.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, I guess which one's the most prominent?
Yeah, but I mean, I just think that like my longstanding view on this is that is that like it just kind of depends on context. Like that clearly, you know, if well, I did peek at the quiz in advance. I don't know if that disqualifies me, but
I've
this
also
is
gone on about it for the best part of the year. So,
but you know, it would be pretty inconsistent with one of my upcoming answers if I didn't give at least a little nod towards Unreal as like
right.
a reasonable position. Um, but yeah, look, I think that there clearly is some sort of psychological and or social you know, way of using gender terms. Even people who are really ideologically committed to denying that there's such a way, I think in their unguarded moments tend to slip up and like talk as if they thought that there was. Like there's you know, I mean, you see this all the time. Like some conservative will be talking to Blair White and they fuck up and call her she, and you
Yeah.
know, because like it's so hard not to, right? You know, so
Yeah,
it's
no,
like
I saw some like conservative channel post a thing on YouTube where they're like, this person crushed in debate about what a woman is, but the person they're describing is a trans woman and they call her a woman.
yeah. That dumb bitch was crushed in a debate about whether she's a woman. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, no, I think that there clearly is, and yeah, I mean, I'm being intentionally vague here because I don't have like a theory of like here are the exact necessary and sufficient conditions. This is not something I've spent nearly enough of my life thinking about to have one of those. But like, I do think that there is clearly some kind of non-biological sense of gender, and probably there are actually multiple non-biological, uh, you know, internally coherent versions of gender, and we probably go back and forth between using them without thinking about it very much. But yeah, I think that saying that there's at least one sort of reasonably well understood, at least in the sense of like we all kind of know how to use it, non-biological notion of gender, I think is clearly right. I do think that there is such a thing as biological sex. I think some people with like really morally and politically admirable intentions are sort of at pains to deny that, but I think I think that's a bad hill to die on. You
Yeah,
know,
I mean, I guess the thing is, biological sex is more complicated than we think it is, but that doesn't mean it's not real.
yeah, exactly. And you know, and by the way, I'm not necessarily a you know large and small gametes person. Like I don't actually, I'm not actually convinced that captures what we normally mean by biological
Right, because
sex.
the thing is, when you do that, you end up with a category which then is like politically irrelevant. Because
Yeah,
it's like, okay, so
yeah,
you've convinced me that this category does fit with the essentialist view you have, but what is the implications? Because it means that these people aren't, raised as women, and they aren't treated as women, and they aren't oppressed as women, so it's irrelevant. But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah. Like I don't think that's going to really capture the ordinary usage of what we mean most of the time. Like I mean, I don't think you know, but like I also think that like sort of language of like assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth is like a little bit odd and misleading because generally speaking, there's no actual assigning going on. Like there's just sort of
right, because it started with intersex people where that actually does happen, but then that's not what happens. It seems weird.
For intersex people, there actually is assigning, but for majority of babies, there's no assigning. So yeah,
right.
look, and you know, and biological sex is obviously a notion that is really important in biology, and I think like I think that would be like a silly piece of conceptual architecture to try to get rid of. I think it's like I agree it's fuzzier around the edges than a lot of people who've never looked into it assume that it is. But I think that lots of things can be fuzzy around the edges and still be real. I mean, look, if we think that there are any social,
we're doing a question later on vagueness, whether it's metaphysical.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we I don't think it's a good idea for people who want to insist on a social or psychological notion of gender to say, oh, if an idea is a little fuzzy, that it's not real. Because I mean, come on, right? Like that one's going to be way fuzzier, than the biological distinction. I think they're both real. I think, biological, yes, there is definitely, there is definitely such a thing as biological sex, social or psychological notions of gender. Yep. Those clearly, like gender in that sense clearly also exists. And even people who have ideological reasons for wanting to deny that it exists, I think in practice, like acknowledge and think about it that way, right? Like it's very hard not to. And unreal, there's definitely a case you can make for that too.
That is why I selected when I was filling
A, B, C, and D.
When I was filling out the survey, because I am part of the datum here, I did pick unreal, not because I actually believe gender is unreal, but just because I think it's a lot more unreal than lots of people think, and lots more unreal than most people filling out the survey would think. The answer on the survey is crushingly towards social.
Which again, I think is like the abortion answer, I think is probably revealing more on a sociological and philosophical level.
Well, I mean, kind of, but also like the lots of kind of trans political stuff is normally based on a psychological idea of gender.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
because it's meant to be like a personal choice. Though it depends how you construct it. It cannot be a personal choice, but it's rather you just trusting someone's testimony.
Yeah. Or I mean, even if it's not a choice, right? Even if you think it's involuntary, it's still psychological on a lot of ordinary accounts, right? Because on a lot of ordinary sort of ways of talking.
Yeah, when I said personal choice, I didn't mean like an elective choice that someone makes.
Right? But it's like if you think that it's at least conceptually coherent that there's such a thing as like a closeted trans person, then like that's got to be psychological, right? I don't know how you would make sense of that on a purely social view.
In terms of exclusive answer, it's 43% social, 15% biological, 4% psychological, and 1% unreal. But lots of people chose at least two or more options. Now on to the next one. Gender categories: preserve, revise, or eliminate.
I don't know, man. Do whatever you want. I don't care.
I'm 100% an abolitionist, but that's probably unsurprising.
Sure. I just think that insofar as odd implies can, saying that you ought to abolish is like, I have a hard time believing that human societies, that like people are going to stop sorting themselves this way. Maybe that's just a limit to my imagination, but but like, I also think that like insofar as this is a political question, which it sure sounds like, this is just kind of one of those things where it's like, I want a society where, we have sort of a baseline of, legal equality for everybody. And then, we make that much more meaningful with material equality for everybody. And then it's like how people live their lives given those tools. Like, I don't fucking care, dude. Like, seriously, like my joke answer is kind of my real answer. It's like, I don't know, figure it out. What do you want?
Yeah, whatever works out best. The common answer on the survey is revise.
Okay.
And now we move on to the companions, which is race, biological, social, or unreal.
Unreal.
To the poor dolezels out there, there's no psychological option here.
I actually had the same thought when I was looking at this earlier, that it's like, it's kind of funny that there's no psychological for there. And what about Rachel? Uh, yeah, yeah. I think that um, I'm I'm pretty committed to Unreal here. I think that there's a you know I think that there's a like this is definitely not an all of the above, because biological is just clearly false.
Right.
The um, social, or the option not given, psychological, I think you can make some case for, but I'm very suspicious of a lot of the way that people try to construct social theories of race. Again, if I'm going to be scrupulous about this, do I think that there's absolutely nothing to a social definition? That's probably going too far. But I'm really wary of the way that people sort of assume that it's like, oh, it's here's my theory of race, it's socially constructed, and that sounds plausible, because what they're really contrasting that to is not Unreal. They're really contrasting that to biological, and they're correctly rejecting biological. But then I think oftentimes it's sort of very underconceptualized, and I think that saying oh, race exists just in some socially constructed sense, I think it's often unclear what that would amount to. And I think a lot of sentences that use race where odd interrogations, like, wait a second, you believe in race? Right? Like, well, social, of course, right? But I think a lot of the cases, I don't know, I'm pretty influenced by this kind of thing that kind of points that Barbara Fields or Adolf Reed, have made on this stuff. I think that a lot of sentences spoken by social constructivists where they use the word race, clarity is diminished rather than enhanced by the use of it. Okay, oftentimes it seems like what they really mean is racism, right? Oh, race caused this or that to happen in the world. It's like, well, what you really mean is racism, right? It's not that's race, racism obviously exists and has effects on the world, but witch trials existed. That doesn't, you don't need witches to exist for witch trials to exist, right? You don't need racial categories to exist for racial prejudice to exist. And I think oftentimes, especially, there's a sort of there's a way that people will take demographic disparities and analyze them as oh, this is about this sort of relationship between these social forces called races, in a way that I'm sort of both analytically and politically suspicious of. Like I mentioned Adolf Reed a second ago, I always think of this article he wrote for Nonsite where he talks about being on this black nationalist radio show, and he's arguing with the host, and he points out that most of the so-called racial wealth gap is actually at the top, and it's not really
right. Both poor white and black people have nothing.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Water.
Yeah, exactly. So the wealth gap is really at the among the wealthiest black people versus the wealthiest white people. That's where you see the real wealth gap. And the hosts.
If you read a lot of popular books on racism, it is a lot of upper class black people whinging about shit that's bad shit happening to them in places I've never been to.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. That's the my friend Jason Miles, the primary host of this channel, had I remember, well, I guess I'll leave out the name of the academic who was being mocked in this conversation, but had this conversation with him a while ago where he was talking about You know, it's like, is this guy ever like out at the country club with his like white in-laws and like, you know, and like, does he ever have moments of being like, yeah, maybe I'm actually okay? And it's like, yeah, well, but like, maybe like the guy handing out the towels says like, are you with a member? And then he's back in business, right? You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, but like, yeah. So in this conversation, you know, Adolf makes this point, and the host says, yeah, but like, there's so much more white collective wealth than there is black collective wealth, and Reed has this great passage where he's making fun of that, and is like, I really want to know how this white collective wealth works. If you're like a waitress in Oklahoma who's having trouble making rent, can you hit up Elon Musk for a donation
Right.
to the white collective wealth fund?
Can I go to the racist bank?
Exactly. It's like, oh, yeah. It's like, I think that's like an old Chris Rock SNL skit. You know, a guy, you know, it's like a, you know, black guy who's, you know, in whiteface or something. He's like spending a day like figuring out what it's like to be white, and he goes to the bank, and they're like, oh, you're white, and they just give him money.
Well, this one should be easy. Race categories: preserve, revise, or eliminate.
Eliminate.
Yeah, eliminate. Like, fucking of course. To be clear, social one on race
Very
and
surprising.
eliminate wins on race categories.
Yeah.
Now to go from the political, for as far as ways we can get, and go to top level metaphysics. Laws of nature: Humean or non-Humean?
Non-human.
Where for the audience, who obviously all know this, Humean laws of nature, which are Humean, means that basically the laws of nature as we understand them are just kind of emergent descriptions of how stuff does stuff, while non-Humean natural laws are actually kind of the laws have some kind of independent existence above and beyond the mere behavior, the mere description of certain goings on.
Yeah. And again, I wouldn't claim to have spent a ton of time thinking about this or have a super well worked out position. Uh, you know, I certainly don't have like some excellent definition in my back pocket to give you of what exactly natural laws are, but there does seem to be some sense to me in which just saying that all your like a natural law is just a description of what happens at a level of generality or something doesn't quite capture it. That it's like if you know like knowing like if you knew there's clearly some sense in which natural laws are explanatory, that that it's not that like when we get new data, right, we know what might happen or might not happen as as a result of natural laws. And it doesn't feel to me like the the Humean idea quite captures that. In fact, it's not even quite clear to me that the Humean idea quite captures all the uses to which David Hume personally puts the notion of natural laws in his work.
Right. I mean, it's like Platonic math or Platonic objects. They're not necessarily anything to do with Plato.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely inclined, at least on kind of like an emotive level,
Sure.
to Humeism with laws of physics. But it's one of those things where when they work 100% of the time instead of 99.99999% of the time, it's a bit like, well, is it? It does lean towards non-humanism, like the evidence, the data.
Yeah.
Morality. This is kind of meta-ethical. There was a meta-ethical question, but I knew the answer for you is anti-realism, so we skipped that one. Non-naturalism, naturalist realism, constructivism, expressivism, or error theory.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of mirrors my answer to the consciousness question, that some of those options seem clearly wrong.
Right.
I don't
Which
know.
one's right?
I'm
Yeah,
less,
like expressivism is like, come on, that's not how they work.
yeah. So, I mean, depending on what you mean by expressivism, I might be more sympathetic to it than you are. But like, I think that the two that seem most obviously wrong to me are, well, the one that seems most obviously wrong is eliminate. relativism. Like it's like, come on, clearly there is some sense in which it's true that torturing babies for fun is wrong, right? Like that's if you're just gonna. I mean, I'm here for it for like a kind of like I'm very open to different possibilities for like what the semantics of that are, or what makes it true, or whatever. But like I think if you just say that that's false, like you really think that? I don't think you really think that. So I think eliminativism is very obviously false, but non-natural moral realism also seems a little crazy. Like there's something about like saying that that there are these moral facts that are independent of material reality that that I find that I find pretty implausible. So yeah, I think like as far as exactly what the right metaethical option is, I don't really know. I mean, there's a certain kind of picture, like a very human-inspired kind of picture of what we're doing when we do moral reasoning that seems right to me. But that picture is that's like, look, there's a certain way in which we like we value things, we care about certain outcomes, and that what we're ultimately doing when we do moral reasoning is we're sort of trying to figure out how to hammer those into a consistent picture and how to like sort of like how to navigate conflicts between them and stuff like that. What does that mean in terms of sort of schmancy metaethical theories, like as in options I'm being asked to choose from here? I think I'm just going to fail this question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a way in which moral naturalism, especially of kind of like a utilitarianism kind, makes a very kind of intuitive sense in that, it seems that pleasure is good and pain is bad.
Yeah.
Just kind of as a basic thing. That's basically what those terms mean. And it seems plausible that goodness supervenes on pleasure and pain supervenes on bad. But the problem is that if you're not convinced by kind of utilitarianism, which neither of us are, and it seems that there's a lot more other things which are valuable beyond hedonic things, then the naturalist picture becomes a lot more complicated.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Again, I'm sure that a couple of those answers are wrong. I don't really know which one's right.
Moral motivation, internalism or externalism, which to explain, internalism is the view that if you accept that something is moral, you should do it basically. You have a reason to do it. While externalism is the view that you just believing something is moral is not sufficient reason that you should be motivated to go and do it.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would clarify about that explanation is that it's like there might be some less controversial, like, sure, something's morally wrong. You have a moral reason not to do it, right? An objective moral reason. But like the way I always understood the internalism externalism issue here was like, okay, but like, do you actually like the sort of thing that internalists often seem to be wanting to deny the possibility of is that somebody could very sincerely believe that something is morally wrong without feeling like the tiniest temptation to stop doing it, right? Or like any of the sort of attitudes that would bespeak that, like
which if true feels like some kind of like mental illness or a failure to understand what the terms mean.
Yeah. So this is like there's some God. I'm trying to remember what the term is for this. It's the there's something like it's something like the enlightened knave or something. The guy who sincerely believes that doing X is wrong, but very cheerfully does X and doesn't feel the tiniest bit of guilt about it, and etc. Right? That internalists seem to want to deny.
And the externalists will bring up like sociopaths, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But to me,
Yeah.
it just feels like sociopaths, if that really is, which I don't think is an actual description, but the kind of the philosophical sociopath who knows things are wrong but does them kind of happily anyway, just feels like someone who doesn't understand what it means for something to be wrong.
Okay, so that's a very strong internalist answer. Yeah, I mean, I think real life sociopathy is probably on a spectrum where it's probably examples of genuine, like 100% indifference of the right kind are probably relatively rare. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I used to be very much on your side of this one. I remember getting into a lot of arguments in grad school where I was like, I was very, I was very moved by the intuition that it's like, come on, you must not really mean what the rest of us mean when you say that something's wrong if you don't feel any kind of motivational pull not to do it. I mean, which clearly, for anybody who's hearing this for the first time, to be clear, nobody's denying the possibility of acrasia, the like weakness of will. It's like obviously something that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Is that people sincerely believe that things are wrong and do them anyway. Nobody denies that. Everybody in this discussion understands that happens.
But if there's weakness of will, there's weakness relative to something that you should be doing, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? Like weakness of will is like you do feel some kind of emotional tug towards not doing the thing that you think is wrong. It's just not strong enough to overpower your appetites or whatever, right? So everybody acknowledges that happens. The question is like, is it really plausible that somebody could? Is it even conceptually possible that somebody could sincerely mean what the rest of us mean by right or wrong, and sincerely think that X is wrong, and feels zero motivational tug towards not doing X? And yeah, I mean, I used to be very strongly in the internalist camp to say no. Clearly, such a person wouldn't mean what the rest of us mean. Now I'm not so sure. I think that like I don't know that I would. I mean, if I don't know if God were participating in this conversation, and so at the end he could like actually just tell us what the right answer is, and he gave us a chance to like put up some money on it. Like I would not put up very much money on this one. But I don't know. I think externalism might actually be right. I think that like it'd probably be very rare for somebody to like very rare for somebody to not feel any kind of motivational tug towards doing the things that they think are right. But I don't know that that's like actually conceptually impossible. I think that just means that like most of us, including most people who would be clinically classified as sociopaths, like aren't complete monsters.
Great. Great for not being a complete monster. Normative ethics. I think this is going to be one where we both go.
Yeah.
But deontology, consequentialism, or virtue ethics. Oh, by the way, internalism won, but only by slightly.
Okay. Uh, yeah. I mean, I kind of, I don't know, man. I mean, like maybe like uh, this might be this might be a little bit like the first gender answer, where it's like I think there's like um, pure consequentialism seems wrong to me because there do seem to be things that are other than consequences that could be morally important. Um, to But like I think there's certainly like consequentialist moral considerations are important. Are there other kind, to the extent that deontology just means there are other kinds of moral considerations? Sure, that's right. Like, is personal virtue morally important? Sure. It's like I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of everything on the menu.
Yeah, I mean, same. I'm definitely kind of, if we go back to my emotions and feelings, um, I'm very inclined towards virtue ethics. It seems to capture the idea of kind of, well, what do I actually do then? Or like, what should I be thinking about? Like, kind of, Consequentialism will tell you like, well, you should give all your money to African people. I'm like, well, how? I'm not going to do that. Like, how can I
Or,
become the sort of person that would do that? And consequentialism doesn't seem to provide any answer to that.
yeah, I mean, I think that I think there's something very right about virtue ethics. Like the way I always think about it is, if nothing else, I think virtue ethics definitely does a better job than the other two do at capturing the what we care about when in certain contexts, moral guilt. Certainly, I don't, maybe I'm really unusual in this respect. I kind of doubt it, but when I feel bad about something that I did, I never think, oh no, I've led to a net loss in the balance
Right.
between happiness and unhappiness in the world, or even I've broken a moral rule. What I think is like, oh God, why did I have to be such a selfish asshole about that?
Right. Personal identity, biological view or physical view, psychological view, or further fact view, which is souls and all that bullshit.
Got me, man.
You don't know.
I don't know. I think that it's not. I mean, I think it's clearly not purely biological. Like, um, the the classic cinematic thought experiment, Freaky Friday. Is clearly to the extent that what's described there seems to be coherent. I don't, clearly saying that if you did a complete psychological switch, that the person, that all that matters is what body you're in for identity seems straightforwardly wrong. I don't. I guess the reason I'm a little bit reluctant to, well, let's just say the reason I'm a little bit reluctant to just full-heartedly say psychological continuity is the only thing that matters in personal identity will probably become a little bit clearer in the next questions.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit one where I'm like, I'm not really sure. Like, I think there's definitely I think it's more of a thing of you know how Parfit has his multi kind of level
Wow.
ethics, where instead of you basically need to pass three conditions for something to be moral. I feel like with personal identity, there's some psychological facts that need to be maintained, and some physical biological facts that need to be maintained for identity to be maintained.
Yeah.
Some
No,
minimum level of both is required.
that sounds plausible.
But people in the Phil paper survey very strongly said, well, not very strongly, but said psychological are a lot more than biological.
Yeah.
Very fun one. Statue and lump. One thing or two things.
I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know.
You get the question, right?
Yeah. So it's is the statue, do we say if we had a statue here we could point to as an example, right? How many objects am I looking at right now? Right? Is the clay out of which the statue is made a different object for the statue? And I think most people's instinctive first response is no, what are you talking about? But then if you say but then you could point out that the clay existed before the statue did. You could you could smash up and reform the statue, and the clay would still exist, but the statue wouldn't. So that strongly suggests that there are two things. A view that at one time I probably would have run with here and tried to defend, but I'm now, I don't know what I think about this now. It would be well, maybe the statue is a temporal part of the of the lump of clay, right? That you have this ongoing object and one. So a temporal part is the same way that my arm is a spatial part of my body. The idea is that 2015 Ben is a temporal part of Ben as a whole. So it's maybe the statue is a temporal part of this ongoing clay object that will continue to exist afterwards, but which is a fun solution. But like, if just asking me point blank what I think about this in 2023, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely inclined towards two things, and that is the most popular option. Scientific realism or scientific anti-realism, where scientific realism refers to a positive epistemic attitude towards the outputs of scientific investigation regarding both observable and unobservable aspects of the world, which is to say, scientific realism is the view that we should accept, even though they're necessarily unobservable. Let's say electrons are real.
Yeah. Yes, I am unambiguously in the electrons are real camp.
Okay. No question, even though we can't see them.
No question. I don't think scientific anti-realism is plausible. I think that, like, I'm a fallibilist about it, right? I mean, it could be that future science will come along and convince me there aren't any electrons, but like, I'm open to that. But like right now, based on our current evidence, yes, I think it's rational to believe in electrons.
Because for anyone that's wondering, like, an electron microscope doesn't actually let you see electrons or even atoms. We can't actually even directly observe atoms. They're too small for our best optical telescope. Even the biggest atom, which I think is an iron atom or something, is by I think several orders of magnitude too small to be observed through an optical microscope. And electron microscopes don't allow for direct observation. But yeah, I get you. Like, that doesn't so what? So what? We can't see it.
Yeah, no, I think that, like, that's not really, like, I think sort of fetishizing this question of what you can, like, directly visually observe is sort of beside the point, right? I mean, I think if the best, and whatever. I mean, there's a point I actually remember really arguing this point and being like, look, we call this just indirect, but like, why is it that if light bounces off something and onto your retina and you have this impression, like, why does that count as direct? If we were born with electron microscopes in our eye sockets, maybe we would think of this as direct. But like, I'm perfectly happy to say
very, very analytic argument.
Yeah, it is. I'm perfectly happy to say, sure, we can't actually directly observe these things, but I still think if the sort of best explanation of our current evidence is that they exist, I still think it's rational to think they exist.
L for naive empiricism. It's funny that people will try and be like online. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm a fucking total empiricist, but also I'm a scientific realist."
Yeah. Right. No, you do have to pick there. The people who are, like, a lot of the people who are most intense about anti-realism. Well, they're intense about anti-realism for empiricist reasons, right? That's, look, I'm
right.
A real empiricist. I only believe in observable entities. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, you do have to choose there because science involves a lot of non-observable entities. My favorite example of this, by the way, is there's a very famous empiricist, anti-realist philosopher named Bas van Fraassen, who is also, this is just a fun little ad hominem swipe at Van Fraassen. It's not a refutation of any of his arguments or anything. I just think it's hilarious that Van Fraassen is also a practicing Catholic, and I believe an adult convert to Catholicism. So his epistemic standards are somehow too high for electrons, but not quite so high that they rule out transubstantiation.
Yeah, God, famously very observable. People are crushingly scientific realists, unsurprising. Teletransporter, new matter, survival or death, which is everyone the Star Trek thing. Beam me up, Scott.
Yeah. I'm not actually sure in Star Trek it is new matter. I mean, maybe they actually say
I think it might be old matter.
I always interpret it as old matter. Yeah, I mean, I actually, I'm a little bit uncertain about this one, but I lean towards death.
I'm 100% fucking dead.
Yeah.
The survey does very much represent what you say, where it's a very slight
Yeah.
in terms of death.
Yeah. I mean, it is really funny. We actually, I guess we talked about this a little bit in the very first one of the streams that we did back in January. But like, I'm, I do find it really funny how many people are sort of strongly death on the teletransporter, but also at least open to the idea of life after, of an afterlife, because it's like, well, hold up.
Right. Well, yeah, we talked about this. Obviously, I put in that
We
Jesus
know
ascended
perfectly well.
bodily into heaven.
Yeah, there's no mystery about what happens to your old matter when you die.
Right.
That is unfortunately.
I really like this one. Vagueness. Is vagueness epistemic, metaphysical, or semantic?
It's definitely not metaphysical.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I mean, my primary, well, maybe. I mean, like if there's a, I mean, I kind of have to hear.
I guess it depends on your theory of composite objects.
Uh huh. Yeah. Right. So I think that it's. So I mean, my primary like area of intersection with this topic is thinking about logic and vagueness. Like, do problems about borderline applications of vague terms give us reason to, reject the law of excluded middle? Think that like sometimes like John is bald might be neither true nor false or something like that. And I'm like, I pretty firmly reject that. Like, I don't think that that's right. I mean, I think that there's something that's very plausible about saying that, the issue here is ultimately about words, right? I mean, that'd be the semantic option. Like the thing that's most implausible about the epistemic view, that it's like, oh, if we would know whether we'd call John bald or not bald, right? If like we're not sure whether John is bald or not bald, that's just because like, there's a fact, but we don't know it. And
I mean, that seems ridiculous. It seems ridiculous, the idea that there's an exact number of grains of sand which forms a clump or a pile or whatever.
Yeah. It does definitely seem ridiculous. So, I mean, and I think the real source of the problem about vagueness is that taking there isn't one seriously, like, also leads to some pretty ridiculous places pretty quickly, right? So we have a real problem. And yeah, this idea that like the reason I think why it seems so ridiculous to say that, if you're dealing with like a borderline application of a vague term like bald or pile or whatever, that like the problem is epistemic, that it's like, no, it seems like if I'm looking at John's head right now, I can see exactly how much hair is there. I know everything there is to know about this situation, right? It's not that like, right. Oh, if only I had some additional piece of information, then I would know, right? That doesn't seem to be what's going on here. So I think that like maybe, I mean, I think maybe like epistemic can get more plausible if you hook it up to semantics. So you say like, okay, what would be the non-crazy view about like what's the thing we don't know, right? When we like that, like what's the piece of information?
Which is what other people mean by the term.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, that's
just semantic.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking maybe like that there are a bunch of different ways of using, the word, and like we don't even have to say other people, right? We could just say, I mean, putting aside any worries about private language or whatever, like we can just say, I don't know what I ultimately mean by it, right? In other words, like, and that might seem funny because it's like, come on, surely the one thing I do know knows what I mean by words, but I actually think that we could plausibly not know something like that, because it's like, well, what you really don't, like, there are a bunch of different ways that I might be using this word right now, and they all overlap in 99.999% of cases that I'm ever going to encounter. But then, like, it could be that there are, that, like, what the thing I don't know is, like, on reflection, how would I use this term? And would that way of using it make this head bald or not bald? I think there's, like, something there, but it's like, yeah, I'm very, like, the idea that there's some sense in which, like, the sort of underlying nature of external reality is vague seems a little ludicrous to me. Um, but yeah.
I would just say that the defense of that would be, any view that there really are piles of sand out there in, like, some strong sense, would, I think, necessarily imply that there's, like, metaphysical vagueness.
Yeah, right. So, and that also, I mean, I guess, like, yeah, because there does seem to be something that's a little bit weird, even about saying that there's some really strong sense in which there are objectively piles, right? I mean, that seems weird too. It's like, there are objectively, cases where X number of grains of sand are clumped together. That's definitely a true thing about external reality. But it's like, is this really, like, a fact about the world, whether they're piles? Like, that seems more like there are, like, any number of different ways of describing the world, and on some of them they count as piles, and some of them they don't, and that just seems like a question about how to use language, not about how to. Okay, so maybe I'm talking myself into semantic, but I mean, like, if we were just lightning rounding this, I would have just said I don't know.
Right. Well, the very strong answer from the people was semantic.
Okay.
We're down to the last 4 questions, by the way.
Wow.
Capital punishment. Well, not the last 4 on the quiz, but the last 4 on the 25% I picked out.
Yeah.
We can do this, like, 3 more times if we wanted to. We kept running out of essays.
I'm sure there'll be at least 3 more times when I know this and ready some Sunday, so we'll probably do it all eventually. But okay, capital punishment.
Permissible or impermissible?
Impermissible.
I think that's definitely true if you are, like, if we're referring to the entity which has basically, like, a monopoly on state violence or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if you're on like a, I don't know, if we're imagining, like, a really dark version of Gilligan's Island, where, like, one of them murders one of the other ones, and you're afraid that they're going to murder again. Would it be wrong for the survivors to kill the murderer? Then no, I don't think that, right? But, like, if you're, and maybe even if you're talking about something that looks like a state or is a state, but, like, there's a civil war going on, and it's like,
right. That's the situation I'm implying about, like, dual power or, like, an insurgent army or whatever, where you don't have the facilities for prison.
Yeah, I mean, what I would mean by impermissible is, given that you're not worried about any of that, right? Given that you have that, like, look, American prisons are really bad at a lot of things, and oftentimes actually accomplish the exact opposite of their stated goals, and they're pretty awful institutions. But one thing we are really, really good at is keeping people in prison. Like, that's not a big problem. Like, generally, it's so rare that, like, there's even a news story about somebody escaping that doesn't, that isn't, like, 12 hours later, they're found shivering in the forest or something. So I think, given, I don't think it's permissible to kill well secured prisoners. I'm pretty comfortable saying that in general.
Right. I don't think we should kill anyone because they deserve it or whatever.
Yeah,
if we have another option.
Exactly. Now, I will say on Twitter a little while ago, I did commit myself to one exception to this, which was for people who use the word creative as a noun.
Yeah, no one deserves to die apart from people who've annoyed me lately on the internet.
Yeah. In that case, I was literally I was sitting at a coffee shop not too far from where I am now, and I was actually hearing people talk about creatives. I was like, okay, these people can die, but
Well,
like,
that's just punishment on you for living in LA.
yeah, that's fair.
Hume again. I should have put these together, but I didn't because this is a well-produced show. Um, skeptic or naturalist?
Naturalist.
Yeah, naturalist. I don't know. Like, obviously, I mean, there's lots of statements where he says things where you could take it him as being really skeptic, but then if you read the rest of it, it's like, well, obviously, no.
Yeah, no, this is. Uh, I don't actually. I think since the first time I read the Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding all the way through, I was like, yeah. I mean, I don't know why people call this guy a skeptic. He's clearly not. Like, there are things that he, there are things that there are like lots of important basic things that he doesn't think we can sort of, justify with explicit arguments. That's true. But like he doesn't.
But like he's like, for instance, he's skeptical of miracles because he doesn't think there's kind of like good empirical basis for them.
Yeah, well, I mean that's a perfect example because it's like his argument against miracles relies on thinking that that we have like really good reasons to think that the natural laws that like are operated in every other instance that we've ever observed are going to also apply to these cases, that like the probability of one of these natural laws failing to be in effect in just this one place is always lower than the probability that somebody who seemed real trustworthy told you, a tall tale, which by the way would also be my commentary on recent on the UFO whistleblower stuff. But I, but yeah, I think that so like in that argument, he clearly believes that we know that physical laws um, are going to operate even in situations that we can't directly check. In fact, he also clearly believes that in the liberty and necessity chapter of the inquiry, where he's talking about free will and determinism. Like he's a determinist. So he is also compatibilist, whatever. But I mean, like he's very strongly believes in determinism. So yeah, I mean, I think there are certain things that he thinks that we can't sort of produce arguments to justify. But I don't think he means that. I don't think that means that he's like an agnostic about whether those things are true. I think that he's just some kind of epistemic externalist about them. That like he thinks that we sort of like there's a point. In fact, I think actually in the inquiry where he's talking about cause and effect and the sort of difficulty of proving it, and or it might be the thing about induction, one or the other of those, right? Where like he's just gone through like all these reasons that you can't, like it's so difficult or impossible to provide an argument to justify it, but then he says like only a fool or a madman would deny that this is true, right? I mean, he clearly believes that somebody with properly functioning cognitive mechanisms is going to have knowledge of these things, even if the knowledge doesn't come from internal justification.
Most people do believe he's a naturalist, but the skeptic percentage is too high for my liking. Immortality. Would you choose it? This is a great one, and it's like a ridiculous one to include in a field paper survey. It's just like it's such like a bro weed stoner question, but I love that it's on there.
Yeah, I always think of Woody Allen. He said, "I don't want immortality through my work. I want immortality through not dying."
Yes, through my body.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I used to think about this all the time, like at such a young age that like probably if I'd ever told anybody what was going through my head, I would have had some sessions with a child psychiatrist. But
Probably not in 2002 or whatever.
no, not in 2002. I was over it by then. But I had but like when I was like 10, right? I would like think about this all the time. And I actually think, as goofy as this is, I think I was watching Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark on TV, and there's this point where he like casually pushes a Nazi off a hill or something, and it got me thinking about death. And I was like, oh wow, right? Is that guy just like not exist anymore? Like
that's a great characteristics of like young English speaking men who like the first people they sympathize with are like the Nazis.
Yeah, particularly funny in my case. But anyway, yeah. So I did. Yeah. So, and I remember like somehow very quickly going from like, I mean, I think the sort of more natural thing would have been to like spend a lot of time ruminating about whether an afterlife actually existed, but somehow I just skipped straight past that to trying to figure out whether I wanted it to exist.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. It's the completely pointless question. And yeah, I used to really obsess about this a lot because the question was always like, okay, I really hate the idea that I'll just stop existing one day, right? That my consciousness will just be snuffed out. But I'm not sure that I like the idea that it would just go on and on and on and on and on forever, and I could never stop it. That also sounds pretty bad. So if 10,000 year renewable lease is on the table, I'll take that one.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I assume when it says immortality, it means unaging, not kind of immune to nuclear bombs. Right.
Yeah.
I am 100% on the side of immortality.
Yeah. I mean, look, I would, I think if I was offered it, I would, I mean, I cannot imagine myself not taking it. I might eventually regret it, 100 million years later or something. But
that's the problem for that cunt.
I mean, I would definitely like, I mean, I'll definitely go with I definitely have the Blade Runner intuition, right? I want more life, fucker. Like, this is not nearly enough. It's crazy that it's so crazy that this is all human beings get. Is this?
Yeah, and we're one of the most long-lived animals, but it's still very, very much not much time.
No, it's not at all very much time. And I think especially like honestly, once you get to be about 30 and and you start to have some sense of how quickly it's going to go, right? It seems like not that long at all. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of mortality. I do find it plausible that we would eventually come to regret immortality, but I mean,
I'm currently regretting mortality. So
yes, I'm currently regretting mortality. So I guess since this is a question being posed in present tense, Ben, I guess I'll go with immortality.
Immortality did just slightly win on the survey. And now for what might be the funniest question on the whole survey, though it definitely wasn't intended that way. The question is, and there's a lot of options. This is a multi-part question, though. I think it's be quick to get through. Other minds, for which groups are some members conscious? And the top one is adult humans.
Yes, I believe some adult humans are conscious. Really, practically all of
them. 4.9%, 4.95% of philosophers didn't pick that option.
At least some adult humans are conscious. Awesome. I love philosophers. Okay, keep
going. Cats.
Yeah, I think cats. Yes, I don't have the slightest doubt that cats are conscious.
Well, it depends what you mean, right? Like when lots of people talk about consciousness, what they seem to refer to is kind of like self-reflective consciousness or something like that.
Oh yeah, well, sure. Lots of humans don't have that. No, I think. Yeah, no, I get it, right? I mean, there are clearly cognitive capacities that cats don't have that adult humans typically do. That that do that, like, sometimes people use the word consciousness in a way that's latching onto those capacities. So fair enough. I could understand how somebody could be thinking about that and say cats no, but like, cats aren't philosophical zombies. Cats have like, pain and pleasure and sensations and experiences and all that
They
stuff.
take drugs.
They do, yeah, and enjoy them. I've seen it.
Fish.
Yeah, but only a little bit.
So it was 88% said cats had consciousness, 65% said fish do. What about flies?
You know, probably. Like, I think. I mean, look. I think that these are, after cats, like flies. Yeah. I mean, I think flies probably do have some tiny rudimentary, like kind of experiences. If I had to guess.
I just saw something very funny on the survey. But the next one, which is also very funny, is worms.
I mean,
Ben, would I still be conscious if I was a worm? Would you still let me? Would you still
I don't
let me
know,
be
but I
close
don't
to
love
the
you.
people if I was a worm?
Yeah, it's the yeah.
95% said that humans have it. 89% said that cats have it.
I mean, I don't know if I really have a strong intuition about this. Worms are the first item on the list that I think there's like a decent chance, like it starts to feel plausible to me that the answer is no, right? Like, because
Completely morally irrelevant, surely.
yeah, I think that's I mean, look, let's put it this way: if like baiting a hook with a worm and using it to catch a fish, if that's morally problematic, the problem isn't with the worm.
So flies got 34% and worms got 24%. Plants.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. They got 7%. Particles. Particles got 2%. Newborn baby.
Wow. Yes.
And I'm as I mentioned earlier, I'm a newborn baby hater. I'm racist against babies. But what I found out was very funny. So there's on the survey you can accept or you can lean towards.
Yeah.
If you exclude the lean towards and put only the accept, actually more people endorsed cats than babies.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, right? I mean, like, look, I do think, and I mean, this is, as you say, this whole thing is like a really funny thing to include because, like, because it, like, surely the reason why, like, it's sort of because it's like, what philosophical argument could like get this shit, right? I mean, we're sort of guessing about our best guesses about what's empirically true, but yeah, I do think that newborn babies are conscious. I mean, this maybe it's an illusion, but it's an illusion that's particularly strong with me right now since I have a nephew who's like 2.5 weeks old, and and I've interacted with him a lot in those 2.5 weeks, and I'm fully under the grips of the illusion. But yeah, I mean, I think, but I actually don't think it's crazy that there are like more people who say cats than newborns because if I think that like there's certainly, um, I think there's certainly a lot more behavioral indication for cats than there is for newborns, and there's
I mean,
more.
certainly newborn babies aren't conscious like I'm conscious, and I
Yeah,
wasn't conscious like I was conscious back then when I was a baby.
yeah. There are mental things that are going on with adult humans that presumably would be going on even with an adult human who somehow survived to adulthood in total isolation, no language skills, etc. Like that are not going on with newborns. That's definitely true, and some but not all of those things are going on with cats.
Yes. And to be clear, I don't actually hate babies in any emotive sense. I just don't. I've just managed to convince myself through philosophical work that they don't matter as much morally, which is, I think, it's an impressive test of kind of how you can pill yourself. Like, and I keep doing this. Like, I'll click on BBC articles about like a child being murdered, and it's like I read it and I'm like, I feel like complete fucking shit now. Like, why did I click on that again? Like, that was just horrible. Um, but then I'll click on stories about a newborn baby dying or being killed. I'm like, well,
Wow. All right. So I'm now convinced that philosophy is a bad thing to study.
um, there's still two more things on this list.
All right. Let's kind of lightning round this. I just saw. Unless you want to entertain the people, I'll go get my plug. I'm very close to being out of power, but yeah, let's.
No, no, it's fine. There's just two. So it's current AI systems, which answers
Yeah.
no.
Oh, current AI systems. Yeah, current AI systems are not conscious. Don't be ridiculous.
They got 3%, and then future AI systems.
I don't know, man. Maybe.
I'm saying like definitely yes, but this is one of the most like kind of ridiculous results for me on the survey that only 39% say yes to that, which is very similar to the amount that flies get. Like I think there can definitely be an AI system which is more conscious than a fly.
Yeah, right. Yes, I think that's right. I think we're talking about future AI. I think that like I yeah. I think that it's like current AI systems. I feel no temptation whatsoever to ascribe consciousness to them. Um, you know, like future AI systems that we'll actually get, maybe, right? Future AI systems that are like coherently describable in a science fiction novel or something. Yeah, sure.
Cool. Well, that's all the questions, man.
Okay.
You passed, or perhaps you failed. We'll have to
Ah,
find out later on a different video where we find
yeah,
out whether philosophical knowledge exists.
fair enough.
Okay, everyone. We can knock off on what was possibly our longest episode ever. It probably
Well,
wasn't, but it might have been.
yeah, could be.
It's definitely good that I selected to only do 25 because it also
Yeah,
gave us a good break point. Though your laptop switching off would have also given us a good break point if I hadn't. So,
that's true. Yeah, just done the Sopranos ending.
okay, I'm going to click the outro button. Bye, everyone.